Well, welcome again to Good Friday. Tonight is not meant to be done in anticipation of Easter. It's not meant to be done like we do Advent, where we anticipate Christmas coming. In Advent, there's the pregnant waiting for Christmas. But in Good Friday, there's a sudden drop into suffering and into grieving without resolution. This is the time that we come to mark the crucifixion of God, and we bring our hearts to the foot of the cross. The challenge of Good Friday is that it's best taken as something we join into. Good Friday is something that's meant to be experienced. And so we slow down for the experience of Good Friday, and the challenge for us tonight is to immerse ourselves in it. But we keep in mind that as we come to the crucifixion, we're not coming to the Mel Gibson gospel of gore tonight. While Jesus did suffer great physical injury and death, he did not physically suffer worse than the physical tortures and deaths that others have suffered. Jesus' death was not part of a physical suffering competition. In fact, Jesus mercifully dies before the two on either side of him. He's not left to languish on, and history records worse accounts of physical torture and physical death than what we find in Jesus. The bottom line of the biblical accounts of Jesus' death, they run counter to a focus on what happened to him physically. They care about what happens spiritually, what happens emotionally with us, with the crucifixion of Jesus. They don't magnify his physical torments, and they don't claim that his physical suffering is worse than anyone else's. So we don't come annually to Jesus' crucifixion on Good Friday to have our stomachs turned by gruesome detail. We come to the crucifixion on Good Friday for the dynamics of who is on the cross, who is left at the foot of the cross, and what does it mean for us. With that focus, we come to Good Friday to bring our hearts to the full picture of Easter. We will mark Easter this Sunday, I promise. But tonight, we push it out of our mind, because Easter is the resolution, but Good Friday is the waiting. Good Friday is the suffering. While we may always take a bit of a different perspective each Good Friday, the facts that mark this day never change. Jesus never becomes He-Man and picks up his sword and goes ballistic on the Romans. Every year that we reopen the crucifixion story, Jesus dies. And a small group of bewildered people who don't know a miracle is coming are left without answers at the foot of the cross. They're left watching their hope die, waiting without resolution, devastated, having pain, sadness, and they're suffering. This year, we focus upon the invitation of Good Friday. It's an invitation to join our heart to that group of suffering people at the foot of the cross, grieving 2,000 years ago. We carry into that small huddle we carry into it our own suffering. We carry into it the places where our own hope is dying and where grief is sweeping into our lives. We're invited on Good Friday to consider, what is it that you are carrying into that small group at the foot of the cross tonight? Are you carrying loss? Are you carrying insult, injury, sickness, death, hopelessness? What is running in your life that's unresolved that you bring to the group at the foot of the cross? I invite you to grab onto the thing that comes to mind and hold on to it tonight. Hold it in your heart. Begin to see what comes to mind that unifies you with the others who felt left abandoned at the foot of the cross. Tears may come tonight, but that's okay. I invite you to refuse to run from the discomfort, just as a select few refused to run 2,000 years ago. They sat in the experience of Good Friday, full of its emotion, full of its devastation. Too often the church at large, it zips past the discomfort of tonight. And they move right on to the resolution of Easter. And it's great to celebrate when things work themselves out. But it misses that for so many of us, in so many areas, things have yet to work themselves out. If we'll pause at the cross on Good Friday, we'll learn how to wait. We'll learn how to grieve. To blow by it is to steal from ourselves the chance to learn how to live half of life. It's to steal from ourselves the chance to learn how to wait well in our own agony and with others in their agony. I don't know about you, but I've known many people who are so obsessed with pushing for the resolution, pushing for the miracle, that they end up being handicapped within the period of waiting, within the period of no answers coming. And time is spent so hard chasing a moment that is as uncertain for us in our suffering as Easter was for those people 2,000 years ago. In the obsessive chase for the unknown moment, precious moments at hand slip through our fingers. Life passes us by if we don't know how to grieve well. Knowing how to grieve well lets us sit with the good and the bad moments of life. Two things happen when we can sit with our hearts at the foot of the cross: to wait well and to grieve well. The first of these two things is that Jesus can begin to speak to us. For those who could not sit in the grief of the cross 2,000 years ago, think about how that impacted them. People who had come over time to hang on Jesus' every word, they missed what he had to say in the pinnacle moment of his life as he was lifted up and glorified. I don't blame them for not being there that night. It's hard to sit in raw moments. It's hard to sit in unresolved places of our life. I've come to know the value of raw moments, and still I can't do it at times. So I don't blame them. But because of the struggle that is held in those raw moments at the foot of crosses, and in our own lives, it is excellent to take one night a year and to come as a community on Good Friday and practice sitting in it. And to see that we're sitting in it and we're not alone. 2,000 years ago, most of Jesus' followers, they missed the intimacy of his last words because they couldn't sit in the suffering. Only 4 women and a sole male disciple were there to hear what Jesus would spend his last breaths on. If we'll bring our hearts to the foot of the cross tonight, to the place of greatest grief, we can begin to hear God speak to us as he did to those 5 so long ago. And he doesn't speak to us from outside our suffering, but from within it. As Jesus reveals the co-suffering love of God. Jesus' suffering on the cross was not just his own. Jesus' suffering on the cross was his mother's suffering. Jesus' suffering on the cross was his disciple John's suffering. And it was the suffering of all who actually abandoned him that night. Because Jesus' suffering was their suffering. And they couldn't sit in it. On his cross, Jesus revealed a God who is upon all the crosses throughout time, no matter what they actually look like. Dorothy Sowell put it this way: Jesus continues to die before our eyes. His death has not ended. He suffers wherever people are tormented. Jesus places himself with us upon the crosses of our own suffering. Our co-suffering God will not let us suffer alone. So our crosses always become Jesus' cross. Our suffering is his suffering, and his suffering becomes our suffering. He places himself upon all of our crosses, so that when we come tonight to look upon Jesus on his cross, we are simultaneously gathering at the feet of our own crosses, and we see him upon them. It is from there, ever present upon the cross, as he unifies all of our crosses into the cross. Jesus is fully invested, and he speaks to us as we come together in the unified huddle of unresolved suffering and grief. And just as Jesus is upon all the crosses across time, we then rest assured that when people take the part of us that hopes, the part of us that invests time, the part of us that loves, the part of us that sees our worth, when people take even our own humanity and they crucify it, they are crucifying Jesus again. So as we come to the foot of the cross that has swallowed our crosses, if we will sit in that uncomfortable place at the base of it, we will hear Jesus speak his precious words to us from on the cross. The second thing that happens when we come to the foot of the cross is that we will find genuine community. Because as God lays bare his own heart of unconditional love, and a group of people gather in front of that unconditional love, our hearts are moved, and we begin to find allowance and safety to become honest about an entire half of our lives. It's the other half from the joy and the celebration. It's the half of the human life that is made up of suffering and weeping. At the foot of the cross, our attempts to compartmentalize, to gloss over, to deny, to outrun, or to bury the grief half of us begins to unravel at the foot of the cross. And we can become known and loved within the community at the foot of the cross for the whole person that we are, for the good and the bad. Holding in our hearts whatever may have come to mind tonight that brings you to the community at the foot of the cross. And taking these thoughts to mind that I am seeking community and I am searching to hear Jesus' words. We come to our communal event for those both here and online. And we feel the weight of tonight. This is the night of humanity's ultimate revolt. This is the night that marks the lynching of God, the death of hope, and the weight of tonight means that none of us are required to look happy. This is the day of explicit permission to get to set aside the smile that we otherwise have to work up every day when we go see people. And we get to join the others in the suffering and grief at the foot of the cross. And we look up and we consider, what do we see on the cross that makes where I am the place of grieving? We always see Jesus, but what else is it on that cross? Because whatever it is that we're grieving at the foot of the cross, that's what we will find dying on the cross. What do we see dying upon that cross that Jesus has come to suffer with? What has the world as a whole, or what has personal events, or what has someone taken from us and crucified on the cross of our life? Is it our dreams? Is it our health? Is it a loved one? It can be anything when you come to the foot of the cross. There is no wrong answer. Maybe you come with your grief tonight to the foot of the cross. And as you look up to the cross, you are shocked to see all of you on that cross. Every bit of you is on a cross right now, suffering. And it feels like the events of your life have seized your whole person and crucified it. And you are watching yourself die on the cross. And you are at the foot of it grieving. I've been there. Many have been there, each in their own way. And the temptation is great to run from the experience of the foot of the cross. And it's even greater when we look up to see what's on the cross. The temptation is great to run like many of Jesus' followers did, or to just ignore it and move on quickly to Easter. But if we will sit in the half of life that is at the foot of the cross, we can actually find that we will be made whole because we will find the other half of community. We will find the other half of God. And we'll come to sit with what is actually half of ourselves. And we'll hear some of God's most precious words. Don't know what for you is grieving you at the foot of the cross, but we're going to move into worship. I invite you to let whatever that unresolved grief is bring you to experience the foot of the cross. See that Jesus has made your cross his cross. See that you have community here with you at the foot of the cross. And listen to what Jesus may say in your suffering that we would miss if we ran, that we would miss if we just fast forwarded to the celebration. So take some time as we worship to sit at the foot of the cross. In the confusion, in unresolved suffering, in agony, in grief of whatever you have in your life right now. Let's sit at the foot of the cross and worship.
Here I come, quiet my soul. Remember, redemption's hill, your blood was spilled. My ransom, everything I once held dear, I count it all as lost. Lead me to the cross, where your love poured out. Bring me to my knees, Lord, I lay me down. Rid me of myself, I belong to you. Lead me, lead me to the cross. Lead me to the cross. Nearer as I tempted and tried, human, the word became flesh, bore my sin and death. Now you're risen, everything I once, everything I once held dear, and I count it all as lost. To lead me to the cross, where your love poured out. Bring me to my knees, Lord, I lay me down. Rid me of myself, I belong to you. Lead me, lead me to the cross. Lead me to your heart. 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 Lead me to the cross, where your love poured out. Bring me to my knees, Lord, I lay me down. Rid me of myself, I belong to you. No, lead me, lead me to the cross. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Holy, holy is he. Sing a new song to him who sits on heaven's mercy seat. We sing, holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. With all creation I sing praise to the King of Kings. For you are my everything, and I will adore you. I adore you. Clothe the rainbows of living color, flashes of light, rolls of thunder. Blessing and honor, strength and glory and power be to you, the only wise King. You are holy, 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 holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. With all creation I sing praise to the King of Kings. You are my everything, and I will adore you. You are my everything. Filled with wonder, awestruck wonder at the mention of your name. Jesus, your name is power, breath and living water. It's such a marvelous mystery. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. With all creation I sing praise to the King of Kings. But you are my everything, and I will adore you. I will adore you. With all creation I sing praise to the King of Kings. You are my everything, and I will adore you. On a hill far away, stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. And I love that old cross where the dearest and best for a world of lost sinners was slain. So I cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I'll cling to the old rugged cross in exchange it's only for a crown. Oh, the old rugged cross, so despised by the world, has a wondrous attraction to me. For the dear Lamb of God left his glory above to bear it to dark Calvary. So I cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross in exchange it's only for a crown. In the old rugged cross, stained with blood so divine, a wondrous beauty I see. For 'twas from that old cross Jesus suffered and died to pardon and sanctify me. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross in exchange it's someday for a crown. To the old rugged cross I will ever be true. Its shame and reproach gladly bear. Then he'll call me someday to my home far away, where his glory forever I'll share. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I'll cling to the old rugged cross in exchange it's someday for the crown. I will cling to the old rugged cross in exchange it's someday for a crown.
I invite you to continue to keep your place at the foot of the cross with whatever suffering you've brought there, whatever unresolved grief that you carry to the foot of the cross. Remain there as we consider a few of the words Jesus spoke from his cross 2,000 years ago. Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. Foremost, these are the words that saved the world. At the cross, the world sinned its sins onto Jesus, Emmanuel, God with us. And Jesus shows us a God who absorbs the sin and recycles it into forgiveness. These words are often taken to refer to those who are actively crucifying Jesus, the Romans, the Jews, those who oppressed Jesus then. But as Jesus is lifted up on the cross, and then as he looks down to see how many have left him as they fled at his arrest. Out of my own experience, I consider if it would be harder for me to forgive my opponents who are sadly acting as expected, or to forgive those in whom I invested so much love, so much time. And in my crucial moment, they have abandoned me. They have betrayed the relationship that we supposedly had. I consider that for me, it's been not so hard to work to forgive those who treated me as I generally expected they would. But it's been hardest to forgive those who weren't supposed to betray me. It's been harder for me to forgive the ones who were supposed to have my back and care about me than it's been to forgive the ones who are shooting at me. But I believe that as Jesus is raised up and he looks down to see that he can now count his loyal followers on a single pierced hand. Thank you. His unconditional love speaks forgiveness. His unconditional love speaks forgiveness to his most beloved followers of yesterday, who were not with him that day. That is how great our God's forgiveness is. So we come to "It is finished." And yes, it is. Finished upon the cross are the ideas of Jesus as he was supposed to be. Finished are the ideas of Jesus as he was hoped to be. And finished are the ideas of Jesus as he was demanded to be. Jesus has come to show us the Father, and Jesus has revealed the co-suffering love of the Father for all time. And as I continue to sit at the foot of the cross and look up at the unfathomable forgiveness of God, who could forgive those who would not show up to his most crucial day, the words "it is finished" are proclaimed time and again to me as my misconceptions of Jesus continue to be finished off, as I gaze even deeper upon the fully exposed heart of God upon the cross. Sam Wells writes that the cross makes us wonder about everything else we ever thought about God, except for one thing. one thing is made utterly clear. When we see the pain, when we feel the grief, when we look upon the loneliness, when we touch the wounds, when we hear the cries, we know that God will go to any lengths for us. God will never be separated from us. That loving us is written into God's DNA. That there's no part of God that has any desire to be, except to be with us. That Jesus is the embodiment of the way God's destiny is wrapped up in us forever. Any other notion of God, any other speculation about God's wishes, any other idea about what lies at the heart of God is gone in Jesus on the cross. It is over. It is dispelled. It is finished. So it is finished. And the finish is not the miracle at the end. The finish is the completion of Jesus' revelation to us of who the Father is, fully exposing the Father upon the cross. And now, there's nothing left for Jesus to do. And so he breathes his last. I invite you, if you need to continue to sit at the foot of the cross. We're going to put some instrumental worship on after Nate plays a final song of worship. Have you come up, Nate? A group 2,000 years ago had to finally walk away from the foot of the cross with no answer. I encourage you tonight to consider what you hold at the foot of the cross, to sit in it, and to not walk away too quickly.